expensive, going from a minimum of $46 per ticket to a minimum of $341 a ticket, Wolf. This seems to be helping Chris Rock, at least in the immediate.
All right, Brian, thank you very, very much. I'll be back in half an hour on our new streaming service, CNN Plus, with the debut of my new show called The Newscast. And at 9 Eastern for CNN Tonight. Stay with us. Lots of news. Aaron Burnett starts right now.
Up front next, the breaking news. Kiev under attack. Our crew on the ground reporting major artillery and rocket fire tonight, even as Russia claims it is scaling back on attacks there. Plus, cheating death, a survivor of the Mariupol theater bombing, the single deadliest attack of the war so far, speaking to CNN about how she narrowly escaped death. And a super yacht belonging to an unnamed Russian businessman seized by authorities tonight. Inside, a so-called infinite wine cellar, patented freshwater swimming pool. So what is that yacht's connection to Vladimir Putin? Let's go out front. And good evening, I'm Aaron Burnett. Out front tonight, the breaking news: under attack. CNN's crew on the ground in Kiev reporting they heard major artillery and rocket fire attack tonight. You can hear it. This even as Putin says his forces would scale back on attacks on Kiev and Chernihiv. That claim coming after weeks of failed attempts by Russians to overtake those cities. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky calling out Putin's empty promises tonight.
The signals that we hear from the negotiating platform can be called positive, but these signals don't drown out the explosions of Russian bombs.
President Biden echoing Zelensky tonight, saying he and his administration do not believe Russia's promise to de-escalate after meeting with Ukrainian negotiators.
We'll see. I don't read anything into it until I see what their actions are.
Well, the actions are loud and clear tonight, right? We can hear them. You can hear all of that fire in Kyiv, louder than any night recently. So why then did Russia today say it will, quote, drastically reduce its military assault on the Ukrainian cities of Kyiv and Chernihiv, right? The capital of Ukraine, and instead focus on the Donbass? Well, maybe it's because Putin is simply trying to regroup. Or maybe he is totally changing his goal and trying to pretend that that was his goal all the way along. Either way, the reality is that he's saying anything at all and making any move at all because he failed to seize Kyiv and conquer Ukraine. He failed to control the capital after 4 weeks of fighting, failed in keeping his own forces safe. Russia has lost up to 16,000 troops so far, according to Zelensky. The U.S. intelligence numbers aren't far from that. That's more than the 2,300 troops the United States lost during 20 years in Afghanistan. And a staggering number of Russian ships, aircraft, and tanks have also been damaged or destroyed. This video you're looking at here is from outside Kharkiv. The Ukrainian military showing off Russian equipment that they captured, and they're now using it. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, Ukrainian troops have mounted stiffer than expected opposition to Putin's forces. And that courage on the battlefield is something we witnessed in Ukraine. Men, young and old, were signing up at military recruitment centers. They were showing up when the missiles landed, and they were unafraid, ready to protect their land and their families. There was not a pause or a heartbeat of a second pause. Now, the Pentagon says that despite Russia's setbacks, the threat to the capital and surrounding towns is still far from over. Today, our Fred Pleitgen and his team were visiting a residential area near Irpin outside Kyiv. This is what they witnessed. You can hear it. Frequent incoming and outgoing fire, the thud of explosions. They also heard the sound of multiple rocket launchers. We have reporters across Ukraine, also tonight in Hungary, including Fred in Kyiv. And I want to start with you, if I may, Fred, because you were in Irpin. You've been hearing major artillery and rocket fire, rocket launchers, all within the past couple of hours. So, tell me what's happening on the ground. Obviously, the sounds we're hearing are more fast and furious than it has been the case in recent days, even as Putin says he's scaling back.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The sounds certainly have been a lot more furious. And, one of the things that we did, Aaron, when we heard that announcement coming from the Russians after those negotiations, is we actually went to an area near Irpin, as you said, right very close to the front line. And there we spoke to a couple of people. And quite frankly, no one believed that Vladimir Putin was really withdrawing his forces because of he wanted to spare the capital or because he wanted to create trust with the Ukrainians. They all said that the reason why they believed this was happening is because the Russians simply lost in trying to get into Kiev, that they weren't able to get in because because the Ukrainian forces were so strong. But I think one thing that is really important to say is that what we're hearing right now, tonight, what we have been hearing tonight, those explosions, much more than in days before, Ukrainian troops on the ground told us that's something that they've been seeing for a couple of days. And they said that their leadership has also seen some Russian forces withdraw. They say they're not sure whether this uptick in shelling that they're seeing could be because there's some sort of scorched earth tactics, or possibly because the Russians might be covering their withdrawal. In any case, the Ukrainians say they obviously remain very confident that they're going to pull through, that the Russians are not going to get into the city. And certainly you can tell that there is still a lot of distrust now, especially, of course, towards Vladimir Putin. Let's have a look. Even after Russia announced it plans to withdraw most forces from around Kiev, the fighting continues. Residents we spoke to told us they don't believe Moscow's words are for real. On the one hand, they retreat, and on the other, they will transfer their efforts to other positions, Alexander says, so it's difficult to talk about a withdrawal. I do not believe in it. It's probably just a rotation, says Yuri. It's a regrouping of their troops. Despite its forces being stalled near Kiev for weeks, Russia claims it will withdraw because it has achieved its military objectives and now wants to make a positive gesture to Ukraine, Moscow's negotiating team said after talks in Istanbul. A decision was made to radically, at times, reduce military activity in the Kiev and Chernihiv directions, said Russia's deputy defense minister. But the Russians also made clear this is not a ceasefire, and the sounds of heavy battles still reverberate around the capital. But the territorial defense forces at this checkpoint say, make no mistake, if the Russians really do withdraw, it's because they lost.
From the first days of war, it was obvious that Russians will be defeated on the battlefield, in the diplomatic field and political field. It was out of the questions.
While many here hope the battle for Kiev could end soon, the toll both in blood and infrastructure is massive. And parliamentarian Roman Hryshchuk tells me he's not sure Ukrainians will ever be able to trust Russia again.
How long do you think it could take to make relations better again before there can be trust between Russia and Ukraine again?
I don't believe...
Or trust towards the Russians, I would say.
I think it will be years and years, maybe hundreds of years. And, every people in Ukraine lost all their house, of relatives, of friends in this war. And our children, they have a night in shelter, they listen to these bombs, and it's for ages.
So as you can see there, Aaron, I mean, a lot of trust just destroyed between Russia and Ukraine, obviously, with this assault that happened here on the Ukrainian capital. And what we're hearing from Ukrainian politicians, from the Ukrainian people, from the folks here in Kiev, is they obviously don't trust the fact that these Russian forces are really going to leave. They certainly want to see evidence before they would believe it. And we also have to keep in mind, and we've been reporting about this, this is not just the only city that has been under attack. Of course, you still have Chernihiv just to the north of here that's still surrounded by Russian forces. They claim they want to get out of that area as well. But again, the folks here really don't trust that just yet, Aaron.
All right. Thank you very much, Fred. Ronald Marks was a former CIA official who oversaw actions against Russian spying operations, and retired Army Major General Paul Eaton is the former commanding general of the Coalition Military Assistance Training Team in Iraq. Thanks very much to both of you. So, General Eaton, Russia's defense minister says the main tasks, his words, of their, quote, special military operation in Ukraine have been completed. But they had, of course, missiles had come down across the entire country, and they have, troops around Kiev and around Chernihiv, and they say they're going to pull them back. Now, obviously, that may be completely untrue, but translate this for me. Why they would be saying that their operation is complete, given that they failed in so many obvious objectives?
Right, Aaron, thank you. This has been just a terribly run campaign. It is a stunningly inept performance by a very large army. So right now, we've got a commander-in-chief in Russia, President Putin, who is looking desperately for an off-ramp. So I think what he's created here is an opportunity to say, we have accomplished our objectives and we're going to back off. We're going to break contact. And don't ever make us come back here again is probably going to be the next thing he says. The artillery that you're hearing, the missile strikes, the MLRS that are going in, that may be covering the withdrawal, or it may be just a continuation of the terror campaign that he is mounting against the Ukrainian people to help set the stage for meaningful negotiations, perhaps.
Right, until they give something up, he's not going to stop, or it could show what he's still capable of doing. I can see your logic there. So, Ronald, the defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, right, who is back out again, says, and I quote him, "The Ukrainian army has suffered significant damage. This allows us to focus efforts on achieving the main goal, the liberation of Donbass." Now, Ronald, they've killed countless civilians. They have leveled entire cities. They've leveled entire cities. It's just wiped them off the map. Donbass, prior to the invasion, when all those cities were there and those people were alive, was home to 2 self-declared republics before a single shot was fired. I mean, is it possible, Ronald, that they could have inflicted the pain and suffering on Ukraine that they have, and on their own economy, and lost their global standing to literally get back to where they started?
Well, it certainly wasn't
what we have is
so I'll say that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think what you're seeing here right now is what happens when a chess player gets cornered. I think Putin overestimated his capabilities. I think the logistical capabilities, frankly, our intelligence, being able to follow them so closely, they really telegraphed a lot of their punches. I mean, he expected, and we anticipate, he wanted to get this thing over in 10 to 14 days. And what he did is he ran into the fog of war, as we say. I don't think he counted on the Ukrainian resistance. I don't think he counted on his own troop incompetence, the inability to deal with small units. The problem just with logistics, I mean, it's the old story about strategy. People talk about strategy, but it's logistics that matter. This is the largest Russian military operation really since Afghanistan. Yeah. With cheap tires on the trucks and no gasoline. I mean, it's really been, for what he was expecting to be a triumph, a real disaster. So he's a good chess player. He's still dangerous, but he is clearly now beginning to, as they say, expand his options. And don't forget ever that one of his options is to go back in there if he can and win. And by win, I mean take Ukraine or leave a Ukraine rump state of sorts. So we're not out of the woods on this one yet, but you're beginning to hear him expand his options, and including, by the way, the negotiations. I love when the Russians come to the negotiating table, talk about a stall. And that's, I think, what we're doing here right now, looking for options, catching a deep breath. But I think he's just as dangerous he was weeks ago when this thing started.
Right, and of course, keep in mind, right, as everyone should know, right, in Syria, right, it was negotiations constantly, right, and nothing ever stopped, right? I mean, that has been their modus operandi for a long time. So, General, those explosions, so what do you think they are? I mean, I guess they could be a combination of both, right? Both covering a retreat and proving the point of, if you don't make a move on your side now, we can still crush you with this awful artillery.
So, Aaron, the Russian army has proven incompetent in integrating maneuver, direct fires, and indirect fires. They have proven incompetent in integrating the joint force to create an effect on the ground. So I don't believe that he has suddenly gotten competent enough to cover a withdrawal with fires. I believe that what we're seeing is old Vietnam tactic of H&I, harassment and interdiction fires, but fires that are completely dedicated to creating terror in the civilian population of Ukraine, and to up the ante on the Russian side for further negotiations. But I believe he's got an off-ramp that he's seen here, and I hope he takes it.
Ronald, can I just ask you a question, as given your experience in the CIA? How did Putin not know he would see the resistance he sees, right? You would imagine he's got excellent sources in Ukrainian intelligence. In the 2 weeks that I was there, it was blatantly obvious, and I'm not in your line of work, that there would be fierce resistance. It was the one thing that was screaming clear in your face. You didn't even need to be an intelligence person to know it. And yet he didn't.
Well, I think one of the things that you're running, I'm sorry, Aaron, I've lost the signal here, but I think one of the issues at hand here right now is that you know, he had sort of cleaned out his services a couple of times. He has people around him who want to tell him what it is that he wanted to hear. And so, frankly, I think he was blindsided. I don't think he was given the kind of information that he needed to have going in. I'm not so sure what he would have listened to at this point either. I mean, there's another problem here as well. It's not just an intelligence failure, but it's also a leadership failure on his part.
All right. Thank you both very much. Ronald, thank you. General, thanks. And next, a terrifying story of survival. For the first time, we're hearing from a family that survived that deadly attack on the Mariupol theater. Remember the one where they had children written on both sides that was being used as a shelter?
My mom was in another part of the theater and wall fallen to her.
Plus, the UK seizing a Russian super yacht, complete with a wine cellar, freshwater swimming pool. And wait until you hear the lengths the owner of this yacht went to try to keep his identity hidden. And the January 6th Select Committee now focusing on White House records that show a reported 7-hour gap in Trump's phone logs.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 70,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore CNN.com/impact. Click to take action.
When you freeze fruits and vegetables, you actually help lock in nutrients, especially vitamin C. So if you've got extra fruit you might not eat right away, freezing is a great choice. In fact, you'll often get more nutrients out of the food if you freeze it when it's fresh than if you let the produce sit in your refrigerator. A University of Georgia study found that after 5 days, most fresh produce loses vitamin content, especially vitamin A, vitamin C, and folate. Freezing is a way to push the pause button. So keep your freezer full of fruits and veggies to enjoy in smoothies or as side dishes. And you don't have to do it yourself. Buying frozen fruits and vegetables is a healthy choice too. Frozen peas or spinach may contain more vitamin C than their counterparts that have been sitting in the produce section for days.
No matter where you are in the world, there is a clear pattern on how governments and leaders use the power in their hands. Will this change Europe? Demonstrations erupted over unemployment. There could be some very serious national security questions. Living and working in the US right now gives me an important perspective as an outsider looking in. I'm Robin Kerno in Atlanta, and this is CNN.
He's interviewed 5 U.S. presidents, authored 7 books, and has an independent voice that resonates.
What happened to when we were united against a common enemy?
He's raw, unique, and one of America's most important talk show hosts. Watch Smirconish, Saturday on CNN.
The UN giving the first estimate of just how deadly the attacks on the city of Mariupol have been, telling CNN that thousands of civilians may have died in the past month. President Zelensky calling it a crime against humanity.
What the Russian troops are doing to Mariupol is a crime against humanity, which is literally carried out live on air in front of the eyes of the whole planet.
Of course, it was in the city of Mariupol that theater filled with more than 1,000 refugees that said children on the side was bombed by Russian forces. It was the single deadliest attack known to date. At least 300 people died there underground, huddled for safety. They died. An unknown number are believed to still be buried in the rubble. And tonight, for the first time, a survivor who narrowly escaped the attack is speaking to CNN. Ivan Watson is out front tonight in Zaporizhia. And Ivan, you know, just to think about this, to think about the bombing and then to die buried underground, it's horrible to think about how narrowly some escaped death and others died.
You're absolutely right. I'm about to introduce you to a young Ukrainian woman whose apartment, she says, was destroyed by the Russian bombardment of her city, which prompted her and her mother and sister and their cat to go and seek shelter in a friend's apartment. They spent 6 days hiding in the hallway of the apartment from the ongoing fighting with nothing to eat or drink but water and cookies, no heat, and they were freezing until they got some information to try to go take shelter in this iconic building in Mariupol, the Mariupol Drama Theater. This was the Mariupol Drama Theater before Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, a cultural and architectural symbol of the city. And when the Russian military laid its deadly siege of Mariupol, the theater became a safe haven.
6 people, like with a cat, we go on the street and Russian tanks started to shooting us and we're running with craziness, and then we go to the theater, and you know what, in the theater was a lot of people. They was like, be okay, we have a food, they give us a tea, and they said like you should find a place where you could like a bed.
This woman and her family recently escaped from Mariupol.
My name is Maria Kutnyakova. I'm from Mariupol. I'm Maria from Mariupol.
On the morning of March 16th, Maria, her mother, sister, and cat joined hundreds of other civilians sheltering in the theater. Footage from March 10th shows families huddled there in the dark, feeling protected perhaps by the signs "Дети," children in Russian, that volunteers posted outside the building. Shortly after arriving, Maria went to check whether an uncle who lived nearby was still alive.
Now I hearing the noise of the plane, like bombs plane. We know how it's how it's this noise because it's bombed every day.
She returned to the theater to find it destroyed.
So I understand that my family in the theater, and everyone screaming the names, you know, like Mama, Papa, Losha, Sasha, and I'm started calling like Mom, Galia.
Footage of the immediate aftermath shows dazed civilians covered in dust, while the roof over the main auditorium had completely collapsed.
When the theater was bombed, my sister was standing with the window, and the window was like blow up, and she's fallen down. And my mom was in another part of the theater, and wall fallen to her.
Maria's mother and sister were wounded, but survived. Your sister, is she doing all right?
No.
Really?
She's like contused.
She's got a concussion.
Yeah.
Shortly after the initial strike on the theater, Maria says what was left of the building came under a fresh artillery attack.
Everyone started screaming that theater is on fire, so we should run. And we're running, but Russians bombed it. So we running from the theater, and bombs was like this.
It eventually took 9 days for Maria and her family to get through Russian checkpoints and reach relative safety in Ukrainian-controlled territory. You seem very positive and upbeat right now.
I understand that I'm very lucky. You understand, like thousands and hundreds of people still in Mariupol, and they bombed. They have no food, no water, they have no medicine, nothing. And I understand I'm very lucky. Like, I have my arms, I have my legs. What I need anymore? Nothing.
And your family.
Yeah, and my family. My cat is safe, so like.
This is little Mushka. She's a 2-year-old cat, and she survived the bombing of the Mariupol theater with her family, and they're now headed to Western Ukraine in this bus.
But no one knows how many people may have died under the rubble. Russia has denied that its forces bombed the theater, and Russian state TV recently showed what was left of it after Russian troops moved into this part of the city. Judging by the damage, the Russian reporter claims, it was bombed from the inside. He alleges there is information that Ukrainian nationalists organized a terrorist attack here, a claim that people inside the theater strongly reject.
Are you angry right now?
No, I want that Russian just go away. This is Ukrainian territory. I don't understand why they come in and tell me that it's not my land. They're not fighting with the army. They're fighting with every citizen. You know, they bombed hospitals, they bombed kindergartens, they bombed the houses of peaceful people. They're not fighting with the army.
Maria and her family rush to a waiting van. The driver will take them for free to Western Ukraine, where Maria hopes her sister can safely recover from her injuries.
Now, Aaron, like all of the tens of thousands of other Ukrainians who fled Mariupol, they have to escape by going through Russian front lines and checkpoints and suffer the indignity of having their vehicles searched, their phones searched by the same troops that have destroyed their homes and their city. Zaporizhia here is relatively safe. The ground war has not reached this city, but Maria and her family were not going to stay here, even though it's the safest they've been in really more than a month, because the Russian military is only about 20, 30 miles away from where I'm standing. There are curfews here and air raid sirens, and they're not going to take a risk of facing the danger and the trauma of the Russian military again. So that's why they left. Back to you.
Ivan, thank you very much. It's just incredible to see that, just that theater story. All right, well, next, the UK sending a message to Putin and his wealthiest, the oligarchs, seizing this super yacht. It belongs to a mysterious Russian businessman with ties to the Russian president. Wait till you see the story of this. Look at that thing. Plus, one Ukrainian refugee may have lost everything. She is not giving up the fight to help her fellow Ukrainians.
As in all human conflict, adults fight and children suffer. Today, 7.5 million children in Ukraine need to find water and shelter. They need safety and school. They need a place to sleep and comfort in the dark. Show them the world cares. Support UNICEF. On the ground in Ukraine, we won't stop until every child is safe. See how at unicef.org.
I'm Natasha Bertrand at NATO headquarters in Brussels, and this is CNN.
The journey to the top for a successful business in Africa starts with an idea. But how does a concept become a moneymaker? African and global industry leaders share their stories this weekend on Profit Point in CNN Marketplace Africa in association with Dangote.
travel the world, make sure the world travels with you. Check in, log on, and get connected with all of the latest developments at your fingertips. CNN Partner Hotels. Connected to your world.
This is CNN.
Tonight, the UK seizing a nearly $50 million super yacht owned by a Russian businessman tied to Putin. The lavish blue vessel is one of the biggest in the world. It has a freshwater pool, penthouse apartment on the top deck, and it's actually been docked in East London for a specific reason, because the World Super Yacht Awards are happening there. David McKenzie is out front with a look at why authorities zeroed in on this yacht.
It's an extraordinary vessel, nearly 200 feet and costing almost $50 million US. It has an infinity wine cellar and a freshwater pool, and this is the kind of wealth, the luxury of those allegedly associated with Vladimir Putin. But this vessel, this super yacht, isn't going anywhere soon. So this yacht is only a few months old. It was delivered to London with much fanfare from a firm in the Netherlands. Earlier today, officers of the National Crime Agency were on board, effectively impounding the vessel. Now, these yachts have a very complicated ownership structure. Often it's registered in the Caribbean, they say, with a flag from Malta. And throughout the world, there is now a crackdown to target these boats, these yachts, allegedly linked to Vladimir Putin's oligarchs. I'm David from CNN. Are you able to say anything? No comment. No comment? No comment. There's still crew members on board, but they wouldn't say anything to us. The British government has been criticized in recent months for not being harsh enough on oligarchs allegedly linked to Vladimir Putin.
We tracked it down. We now know the connection. The ship won't be going anywhere for the time being, and that's because we take what Putin is doing in Ukraine incredibly serious. And people who have benefited from his regime cannot benefit from sailing around London and the UK in ships like this.
Whether it has any impact on the ongoing conflict really is up for debate, but it really is a powerful signal that this super yacht is now stuck at this wharf. Well, UK officials have yet to name this mysterious businessman, Aaron, but it does point to the complex nature of these transactions. Often the oligarchs have these shell companies, they have sophisticated financial instruments to try and hide their ownership, not just of yachts, but of jets, and of course of real estate, particularly here in London and of course in the US as well. There is pressure now for the US, the UK and European officials to try and squeeze these assets to try and have some kind of impact on those closest to Putin. Aaron?
All right, David, thank you very much. And as Western nations continue seizing yachts and inflicting other punishments on the Russian elite, President Biden and his European counterparts say they're determined to, quote, continue raising costs on Russia for its brutal attacks in Ukraine. Out front now, Ilya Matviev, a longtime Kremlin watcher. And I really appreciate your time, Ilya, and really been following your analysis. So UK authorities seizing this super yacht, 192-foot yacht, owned by a Russian businessman. Just the latest example, of course, of what we've seen, right? Asset seizures in some jurisdictions of oligarchs. At least 8 yachts said to be owned by these individuals have been taken by the West. There are notably other places that haven't participated in this at all, like the UAE. The idea is that by taking the money and assets of the richest Russians, that Putin would then feel pressure. But Ilya, have you seen any evidence that that's working?
I don't really think that this approach is working, because the oligarchs who own those super yachts do not really have political power in Russia anymore. And we call them oligarchs by a force of habit. So they combined political and economic power in the 90s, but in the last 20 years, they were completely subordinated to the regime. They were subordinated to Putin personally, and they do not have any influence on his decisions. So you can take every yacht, from these people, but they won't be able to do anything, even if they're angry at Putin, even if they do not agree with this, with his invasion, but they don't really have much power in this system.
So Ilya, the sanctions obviously are, whether they have influence or not is a separate issue from whether it's hurting them, right? It is hurting them, even though obviously they have money hidden in all sorts of places that no one will ever touch. But the sanctions are really hurting ordinary Russians as well. The Kremlin has acknowledged that people have resorted to panic buying. We've seen video of it, elderly Russians fighting in grocery stores over packs of sugar. Impossible to independently verify some of these videos, though, because there is no independent media in Russia. Right? There's just none. It's all been completely shut down. How bad is the situation for regular Russians right now?
It is pretty bad, and I think that sanctions are quite effective in affecting the lives of ordinary people. So at first, financial sanctions were the most effective, but now I think that logistics and logistical and maritime blockade of Russian trade is even more effective in terms of disrupting Russian economy, and Russian people do suffer from shortages of certain goods, certain essential goods, and from skyrocketing inflation. And it's not like they have a lot of spare cash. Russia was already a poor country when the war began. So they don't have a lot of money to spare.
Right. I think that's such a crucial point that you make. And, for so much of the country, incredibly poor. Incredibly poor in a way that many in the West would not fully recognize. Ilya, thank you so very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And next, new evidence of Russia's deadly assault in southern Ukraine. This video showing the moment a government building was struck by a missile. And we have details on the deadly toll, because it was deadly. Plus, Trump's phone logs from January 6th show a reported 7-hour gap. The logs don't include key calls that we actually factually know Trump had. So why? Why the big donut hole in there?
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Christiana Manpour in Amsterdam, Jerusalem, Sarajevo, Afghanistan. I'm Christiana Manpour in Iran. Christiana Manpour, CNN, with elements of the Galilee division in Israel.
As dusk fell, people were still marching.
Here we are in Habila, a village that has not had any food distribution since June. When the families have finished looking at the names that are posted on those boards, they come here. This is now a memorial to the victims of the Srebrenica massacre. We're very interested to see what's going on here. Mr. President, it's a privilege to address you from Sarajevo. Do you not think that the constant flip-flops of your administration on the issue of Bosnia sets a very dangerous precedent? This is a pretty shocking picture. Would you condemn President Assad for 100,000 plus deaths. You still have huge dreams. They didn't take that away from you.
They only can shoot a body. They cannot shoot my dreams.
I wonder whether you ever think that other countries can learn from what you did. I'm sure you must be their first cycling president. Bonjour, comment ça va? Salam alaikum. Mr. President. What a historic day, huh? Holy Father, you were the first person to call modern slavery and human trafficking a crime against humanity. She says yes, women are the future. Can I just address the elephant in the room? You're wearing your dark glasses. What made you be so passionate about the environment? I saw you listening to that testimony. You look pretty broken up yourself. Does love have a chance of winning?
I always believe that.
This incredible moment caught on camera when a missile hit a government building in the southeastern city of Mykolaiv. You can see it actually happening there. The regional military governor says his office was hit, a giant hole blown into the side of the building. At least 12 people have been confirmed killed in that strike that you saw. Struck 12 people. As you see that, their lives gone. Matt Rivers is out front tonight in Budapest, where Ukrainians have been seeking refuge from this relentless shelling that has cost countless lives.
Each time a new group shows up, it's anybody's guess how many refugees there will be. But more than a month into this war, weary Ukrainians keep coming and coming, looking for safety in the Hungarian capital of Budapest.
So authorities here say that as compared to a few weeks ago, things are now much more organized. So once people come in, they get processed, and then the idea is to get them to where they want to go. So if they want to stay here, they go to door number 4 over here to get local accommodation. Door number 3, that would take them to the airport. And door number 2 and number 1 over here, this is where refugees go when they want to go to the train station here locally.
Making their journey a little easier is Yulia Pokilenko. She's a volunteer, translating Ukrainian into Hungarian or English. And here, she helps us speak with this couple who left behind family as they fled Ukraine just a week ago.
Are you worried about them?
Очень волнуемся, переживаем. Хотим, чтобы все были живы, здоровы.
She wants what everybody would stay alive and be healthy.
She wants what everybody wants,
yes,
to be safe.
It's finished.
Yulia has a gentle touch with these new arrivals. She's warm and kind and empathetic because she too is a refugee from a suburb of Kiev. She fled amidst intense fighting a few weeks ago. Yulia took this video just before she left of the shelter she used when the bombs were falling. And on her way out of the city, she took this video of shell casings on the ground.
Was it difficult to leave your country?
Yes, of course.
Why?
Because it's your country. It's your land. It's so shocked. It's so sad, surprising for what's happened and for why.
She's been here for several weeks with no plans to leave. Yulia desperately wants to be back in Ukraine, but for now, she'll help however she can.
Why are you doing that?
Little help, it's help. Everybody wants help Ukraine how you can.
And today, that meant everything from serving up hot drinks to guiding this woman to get her medication. However, she can show people that she cares. And at the end of our interview, a hug for us too.
Tell everybody about this story.
And a message.
Help, please. Stop at this.
We will. Thank you.
Ukraine.
And we know that Yulia is not the only Ukrainian here in Budapest that's actually helping refugees as they cross the border. We know several other people at that facility, Aaron, were also doing the same thing, and they too were Ukrainian citizens. According to Hungarian National Police data, more than 500,000 Ukrainians have now crossed here into Hungary, making Hungary one of the countries that has accepted the most refugees here as a result of this crisis, increasingly helped out all of those people by their fellow citizens.
All right, thank you very much, Matt. And next, what could explain a reported 7-hour gap in Trump's White House call logs as the insurrection was unfolding? What? Plus a rare moment of unity between the United States and Russia, 254 miles above Earth.
We are like my space brothers and space sister.
In 1917, Cartier came upon his breakthrough, revolutionary, by far most famous design, the Cartier Tank. Now, the inspiration for this design was, as the name suggests, a British Mark IV tank.
For much of its history, it was an extremely exclusive watch. The tank was made in very small numbers until the mid-1960s. Cartier tanks from before the 1960s especially are tremendously collectible. It's an absolutely iconic design.
This became an elegant symbol, a very desirable watch through the ages. We have Jackie Onassis wearing this watch. We have Truman Capote, Andy Warhol, Duke Ellington, Jeff Goldblum. Team Tank is a stylish team indeed. It's a rectangular case and it has these very identifiable vertical sidebars called brancards. You can recognize a tank across the room.
Strands Global Foundation is a nonprofit that has been combating human trafficking for the last 12 years, focused in on 3 areas: prevention education, prevention through employment, and prevention through engagement. So we have a few initiatives that directly look at the root causes. One is prevention education, so that teachers can identify exploitation and trafficking, as well as be trauma-informed, and students in kindergarten all the way through 12th grade can be educated. When the pandemic hit, our prevention education program, Protect, we had to do a pivot. The kids no longer were in classrooms. Teachers were no longer in classrooms teaching. They had to make adjustments to be able to actually reach the kids online, which meant that they were looking in a different way with different eyes at their students as their students were learning this curriculum. We had to make sure that teachers still could identify any exploitation or abuse that was happening. Our second program is called the Employ Plus Empower program, and this is our prevention through employment. We want to make sure that survivors aren't re-exploited and that they have a sustainable job, that they are financially secure, and that they can thrive. Survivor voices are incredibly important in this movement, and I believe strongly that when we listen to survivors, we actually will create prevention programs and initiatives that do exactly what we need to do to prevent this crime.
Ginger is often used to dress up a dish or add spice to a meal, but a growing body of research shows that this root can have big benefits for overall health. Studies suggest that ginger can help calm an upset stomach, often caused by nausea related to pregnancy or chemotherapy. One easy way to get ginger into your diet is with a breakfast smoothie. Blend 1 carrot, 3 apples, and a 1-inch piece of ginger root with a squeeze of lemon, then stir and sip. Another easy way to add ginger to your diet is to puree it into a ginger pumpkin soup, or add it to your favorite meal as a sauce. Another plus, ginger can help you unwind. According to a University of Georgia study, when ginger is consumed, either raw or heated, it helps ease muscle pain after working out by as much as 25%.
A Official White House records show a gap of more than 7 hours in phone calls to or from former President Trump on January 6th. Now, this is according to the Washington Post and CBS News. Not a single call between 11:17 a.m. and 6:54 p.m. That, of course, is the entire window of the insurrection. The records turned over to the January 6th Select Committee reportedly do show Trump having at least 11 phone conversations that morning with people including Rudy Giuliani, Stephen Miller, and Steve Bannon. At least 13 phone conversations that night, once the 7-hour blackout ended. Again, Steve Bannon, Sean Hannity from Fox News, 2 calls with the social media director, Dan Scavino. And the logs also show attempts by Trump to call Senators Bill Hagerty, Josh Hawley, and Mitch McConnell, as well as then Vice President Pence around 9 a.m. So all of that's on there. And then there's the 7-hour hole of the insurrection itself. Evan Perez is out front. And Evan, it's hard to believe Trump would have all those calls on January 6th, and there is not a single one during the entire insurrection itself.
Right, Aaron, and the committee that's investigating the January 6th insurrection is looking into and investigating why that 7.5 hour gap exists. From 11:17 a.m. to 6:54 p.m., there are no records from the White House Records Office or from the switchboard. And so the question is, were those records removed by someone? Were they just simply not recorded properly? Did the committee not receive the full list of records? Those are the questions that they're asking. We know for a fact, for instance, that there are calls not listed on these records that were turned over to the committee that did occur. We know, for instance, that he reached out and spoke to Mike McCarthy, the leader of the House Republicans, during that time. We know that he spoke to Tommy Tuberville. Senator Mike Lee. We know those calls existed and they are not listed on here. So the question is, why is that? One of the possible answers, Aaron, comes from the former president himself. In a statement he provided to the Washington Post, he says he, to his knowledge, has never heard of the term burner phone. And so that is a possibility that might be one of the explanations here. We know for a fact from some more reporting on the White House that the president did use other aides' phones and personal cell phones that were not recorded by the White House system.
All right. Well, Evan, thank you very much. And I want to go now to our senior legal analyst, Laura Coates. So, Laura, on the back of Evan's reporting, the Select Committee, trying to figure out what happened in these 7 hours. So did they just not get the full call logs, or was there literally a black hole that every phone call going on in those 7 hours was on a burner phone or an aide's phone? What do you think possibly happened here?
Well, we know he wasn't napping, and we also know that during that particular point in time, it was part of the most devastating experience for many members of Congress and all of the world watching as people descended onto the United States Capitol. So it's completely inconceivable that there were not telephone calls made. And of course, we know from other corroborating discussions from investigative journalists, those who have spoken to members of Congress, those who have volunteered the information about those moments, that they have spoken to him. So the question now is it a cover-up or an inadvertent failure to report and record the information? And if it's the latter, who is responsible for that? President Trump was not the person actually dictating the diary or the log. So was he dictating, or did somebody say to leave off information? That's part of where we have to follow the story. And finally, we are relying really in whole part on people to be able to volunteer the information or to come forward as witnesses responding to subpoenas to offer what the committee does not know. It does not bode well that all they have are these huge 7-hour gap and no real end in sight for people ensuring they're actually going to cooperate with the committee.
Right. And it's amazing, Lars. We know, obviously, it's funny, many years prior to when he was president, Trump, then Mr. Trump, would take phone calls always through the phone, through the switchboard, through his office. He was not a heavy user of his cell phone, except for when he wasn't in the office, and then he was. But we know that he didn't just take calls through the actual switchboard at the White House, right? Tons of calls came through cell phones and other people's phones. And in fact, we know that there were calls that Trump had during those 7 hours that they've spoken openly about that aren't on this call log. Evan